Merry Christmas, everybody, and welcome back to the Meeple Marathon. Now I have gotten to my top 20 board games of 2022. We're going to do 20 through 11 in today's video. So these are all games that came out either at the very tail end of 2021, and I didn't either get a chance to review them or get my hands on them until 2022, or purely came out in 2022. Most of these are brand new games. There's a couple kind of what some may consider follow-ups or second, third editions, and there's, I believe, just 2 expansions, but these expansions were way too good to leave off the list. So without further ado, let's get started. At number 20, we have My Little Pony Adventures in Equestria deck building game. I've said it before and I'll say it again, that is a mouthful, but this was actually a delightful surprise of a deck building game. So in My Little Pony Tales of Equestria, you have to utilize your teamwork and your friendship in order to overcome obstacles, actually take on objectives that's going to give you resources, aka sugar cubes, to then take on these obstacles. And you have to take on, depending on your difficulty level, say 3 to 5 obstacles, and then take on the final obstacle that's going to complete the game. What's really nice about this game is that there is, there's teamwork and friendship, which are kind of like, leadership and attack in, say, Marvel Legendary. But not every card in the market costs, say, friendship to acquire, and not every objective card requires teamwork to take down. So you always feel like you can utilize the various stats that are on your cards as they're coming up. You never feel like you have just a completely wasted turn where you have nothing but, say, purchasing power and not able to attack somebody, for example, on most other deck builders. So that was very refreshing. Honestly, my biggest disappointment with this game was the fact that for a My Little Pony game, it was actually more advanced than I was expecting, and it's going to be some years before my young daughter, who's super into My Little Pony right now, will be able to, play the game with me. So that was really my only little gripe about the game. It's not a theme that I'm like dying to play, but it was a fun little deck builder. Coming in at number 19 is Legends of Sleepy Hollow. So this is a game that I pledged back in 2017 and then finally arrived 5 years later. I mean, I've gotten on my soapbox about the issues that this company displayed in getting this game to everyone's table. I don't think they handled things very well, but once it got here, I finally said, all right, it's here, let's play this. I was really excited about it. Legends of Sleepy Hollow is this kind of dungeon crawl-esque type game with a very good storyline and a very unique mechanic of spending your action points into these various areas. Some of them can, some of the areas you can put more than one action point into. Others can only take a single action point, but until you have kind of spent all your action points or taken a rest action, you're not going to get them back. You're also going to gain fear, which is going to clog up your action points. It's not going to necessarily take down your health, but fear will get in the way of you doing certain actions, and there's only certain other actions you can take that you can spend that fear on, or if you've spent your fear and then you get a chance to get rid of it, it's not available to get rid of that. It has to do with these player dashboards that you can see here up on the screen. They also implemented the, in-base health tracking for the bad guys. The bad guys are okay. They felt like they just kind of took a pumpkin and said, all right, what 3 ways can we make a pumpkin evil here? But it works. So there's not a huge variety in bad guys. But again, the storyline was rich. The mechanic of choosing your actions and how you're allowed to take those actions and upgrading your character were very slick. The biggest problem is that not only did it take 5 years to get this game, you would think that the amount of QC that they had done would have been immaculate in 5 years, and it was not. They delivered a broken game, and they are in the process of fixing that, but it's then taken, I'll be surprised if I get the components, not upgraded, the fixed components. We're talking like a board and some cards and several, a whole new rule book, which is not very well written. I'll be curious to see if I get it within a year of having the game. So this is one that I just kind of stopped and was like, it's just kind of frustrating me to play. I'm going to wait and see what they do. I have high hopes for this game, but the company just really continues to kind of not make good choices. Number 18, we have Batman, the animated series, Shadow of the Bat. So this is is the second and final game in IDW's Adventure Universal Game System series. The first one being Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So the gimmick with this whole Adventure Universal Game System is the fact that you're rolling dice that are unique to your character. And not only are those dice going to determine the actions that you get to take this round, and I realized as I was making, figuring out this list, I left this game off of my top 10 or top 12 dice games, and it should have been on there because it's a very good dice game. You roll out your dice, and then you decide, all right, I'm going to keep these for myself, but the ones you put on the end are ones that you share with your teammates. So if you see that your teammate didn't roll any movement, you can share your die on this side with, say, Jim Gordon movement, and on this side, if you're playing Robin, you may give Batman an extra punch, so you can really deal some brutal damage. So that whole mechanic is really fun. You're kind of figuring out what you're doing with your dice, how you're going to spend them, what's best for your character. Each character has their own unique dice, which is really nice. My biggest drawback of this game is the fact that you have to play with 4 players because of the whole dice sharing mechanic. So to be able to, keep the game balanced, you have to run 4 characters, which can be kind of fiddly, rolling 4 sets of dice, figuring out all this stuff. And they had a solo mode that you would be allowed to run just Batman. They were going to give you some extra dice. They gave him his own thing, his own character tray or whatnot. But they completely flopped when it came to the solo only version. I think it was Batman the Dark Knight or something like that. So you could only use Batman. You couldn't run any other character solo, and you just played as Batman, and nothing really else changed. They were trying to give you like bonuses and extra rolls and things like that as Batman, but you could tell they just like stopped working on it after a while and completely said, screw it, this is good enough, and mailed it in from there. And it was a big disappointment because I was looking forward to running like some just Batman scenarios, and it came up very short for me. So if you have a group that is A, into Batman, or B, is a group of, I would say 2 to 4 would be perfect. You could do it with 3. Somebody's just going to have to control 2 characters. But a group of 2 or a group of 4 that appreciates the Batman, the miniatures are really nice. And if you get all the Kickstarter content, it's a good variety of miniatures and scenarios and content. It's a huge ode to the animated series, which some people were really into. So yeah, I would highly recommend it in that case. Coming in at number 17 is Star Wars The Clone Wars. So this is a pandemic game and was one that was quite surprising to me. I had no idea it was coming out. It just kind of was announced, and then it was on Target shelves a week later by Z-Man Games. So this game utilizes the pandemic system of just every turn, certain planets are going to get the droids on them, and if the planet's already full, it's going to spread, and if certain things happen, then you get the blockade on them, and things get worse. But that's about it. That's about where it stops. You have individual player powers, which are your Jedi powers, which are nice, but then you also have, the villains, which you didn't really ever have in Pandemic. You had the viruses, but these villains act a specific way. They get their own turn after kind of spreading the droids around. It actually was quite fun. The miniatures are okay. They're pretty decent for being what I would consider a mass market game. The droid miniatures are much smaller, teeny tiny, but that's fine because they're going to be just covering all over the board. I just, keep them in a cup or something off to the side. They don't need to be, and they're decently detailed for, you can see in this one picture, there's like 3 different poses of them. So they're really not bad. And then there's this big chunky die that you're going to roll to determine whether you're going to take any damage or whether you're going to add bonus hits to it. But that's it. Other than that, you pretty much know what you're getting into, but you're going to have this squad of cards that you're going to utilize to get you to the numbers that you need. My biggest gripe with this game was the board. It's just kind of bleh. It's representative of all the various planets in the kind of Star Wars canon right now system. They were all accurate and things like that, so I get that, but I felt like they just could have done more. That big black background just wasn't doing it for me, and I would have liked a more just artistic board. I don't know what I'm saying here, but at the end of the day, the background that's on the board and the color of the planets really have no effect on gameplay, and the gameplay works. So if you're a Star Wars fan or a fan of Pandemic and are wanting something just slightly different but with that same Pandemic feel, this is definitely one to check out. At number 16, I have Tiny Epic Dungeons. So this is part of the Tiny Epic line from Gamelin Games, but was the first one to have a full line of miniatures in it. I was very excited about this one. I just really love dungeon crawlers. Like most of the Tiny Epic line, I give most of them a chance at least. This one, I felt like just really had a lot of potential. Come delivery, it is still a great game. The miniatures are definitely on the small side, which makes sense. It's a Tiny Epic game. You easily could have this game without the miniatures. The miniatures are just bling. It also is kind of a table hog. It takes up a lot of space. There's a decent amount of setup. So it's not really a Tiny Epic game, except when it's stored away in the box. And then if you have the expansion content, you're certainly not fitting it all in one box if you have the miniatures. But anyways, the gameplay works really well. It's kind of these just kind of one-shot scenarios. They do have this, what they call a campaign mode, but it's really just 3 linked scenarios together. I didn't find the campaign mode to be worth it, but playing the one-off scenarios was really fun. I liked the asymmetrical characters. I really liked, finding the items and getting those sets of stuff to get your bonuses and things like that. The system just worked well. So it's definitely probably, it's not quite Tiny Epic Quest, but it's probably second. It's probably jumped ahead of the other ones. All right, here's our first expansion on the list, and that's Lost Ruins of Arnak Expedition Leaders. So I was very taken by Lost Ruins of Arnak back in 2020 and was very excited to see them announce in 2021 that they would be coming out with Expedition Leaders. So all Expedition Leaders, the biggest thing that they offer is asymmetrical player powers. So in the base game, everybody's the same. Everybody has the same starting cards, the same 2, archaeologist meeples. This completely changes up how you kind of approach the game to begin with and how you think you are going to be successful in scoring, things like that. Also makes the AI, playing against the AI, feel a little better with the asymmetrical player powers. Then it adds some more cards, obviously adds a little bit more of everything. Also adds 2 new research tracks, an overlay board that you can flip over if you want to, which was really nice as well. So it just, in general, this is one of those expansions that I don't see you don't need, but I certainly don't see myself ever playing without it. And you could easily introduce someone to the game with this expansion and they would never know that necessarily it was an expansion. So one of those really good, really solid expansions for an already great game. That was Lost Ruins of Arnak Expedition Leaders. At number 14 is Ascension Tactics. So this is technically Ascension Tactics, the miniatures deck building game, My copy of the game is actually the just a retail edition, which has standees, but I'm perfectly fine with that. So this is one of those games that you can go either way. You can go the standee version, or you can go the high-end miniature version. The miniature version is definitely more immersive, especially if they're painted like in this picture below. But you can see the standees above them. They're colorful. The artwork is great. It's in that typical Ascension line. So if you're into that artwork, these standees are right up your alley. But the gameplay is where I got most excited about. It's really just this tactical skirmish game where you're using your hand to not only purchase cards from the market to build your deck, but also then send out your troops and command them with movement points and attack. And it's basically just, area control, kind of King of the Hill or capture the flag type of scenarios for the most part. But I was just surprised at how well it worked at the end of the day. It felt like when the Kickstarter was coming out, I was like, I just don't see it. But as it got more and more attention and accolades, I decided let's try it out. I do love deck building games, and I was really surprised by this one. It's not like blowing my socks off, and I'm not a huge fan of the Ascension deck building game. The artwork it's just kind of for me. But this one just is probably easily my favorite of the Ascension line. So if you're into deck building, this is definitely one to check it out. Number 13 is Flamecraft. So Flamecraft is a very cute, whimsical worker dragon placement game where you are going around, and every time you visit a store, you actually have the chance to upgrade it. Not for you to use it, because you've already used the store, but for the next person to come along, it'll be upgraded. So it's almost like this semi-cooperative worker placement game, which is unique. Eventually you're going to come back to it more than likely, so you're going to get that benefit too, and you are getting some benefit out of placing and upgrading it. But it's a very one of those kind of whimsical games. Would be fine to play with kids. It's not overly complex, and this is another one that you could go with the Meeple version you can see in the upper left corner of the screen, or you could go with the blinged out version that's got unique miniatures colored for each of the dragons, plus the wooden tokens. This is all stuff you can see in the lower left-hand corner. So take your pick. It is definitely, more immersive if you have the miniatures and things like that. But the artwork's the same, the gameplay is the same, no matter which Meeple versus miniature version you get. So keep that in mind. This is again a worker placement. It's got a very whimsical theme to it. It's almost semi-cooperative because everybody's sharing in their own upgrades. And that's really just kind of a resource collection to try and score these, I forget what they're called now, but these tasks, these cards that give you the main VP in the game. So that's pretty much it. But again, very cute game. At number 12 is Nemesis Lockdown. So this is certainly not a new game. This is a direct follow-up to Nemesis, which is essentially Alien, the board game. This is Nemesis Lockdown, where you're now on the planet Mars. You're in a space station. You're no longer up in a ship, and you're trying to deal with the same stuff, but they added some things. So probably the biggest thing that I noticed about Lockdown, that anybody would notice, is that you're not in a ship anymore, and so you can actually travel outside to alternate areas of the map, bunkers and second buildings and things like that. So the original game had a side to B side of the board / map. They were mostly the same. It was just kind of slight different variation in how the tiles were arranged, made it a little harder to get from room to room in the B side. This one completely changes up kind of how what is available to get to when you go outside and use that rover, things like that. Also, I would say that they definitely took some suggestions of people that said, this is like one of the low points of the game, and improved that, mainly with kind of researching the the aliens and things like that, and gaining knowledge on them became easier. I think it's more intuitive the way they did it. And I also added some new aliens that are completely different, ones that kind of mess with your mind, more kind of a psychotic telekinesis type of stuff. And then this other one that's very plant-based. They're spreading spores. They're basically just kind of spreading throughout the base. You just can't get rid of them. It's like, it's a fungus. It's a weed. So these are very interesting, and they're compatible with all of the rest of Nemesis. I probably still kind of prefer the feel of the Nostromo, the ship, because that feels very alien to me, that setting. But otherwise, I definitely appreciated the, just the rules changes that they made and the quality of life changes they made and everything that they updated about this game. I thought was spot on, and it already took a great game and just made it that much better. So Nemesis Lockdown is certainly not a bad way to start, or if you're a fan of Nemesis, this is definitely one to check out to expand that universe. And the last one for this video is going to be number 11, and that's Hexplore Volume 4, Domain of Mirza Noctis. So I had never considered, I take that back. I had considered a Hexplore game before, but they just looked very dry to me. They looked very mathy. It was just a lot of numbers on a dry erase board. There was nothing very endearing or attention grabbing in what I had seen before. But man, was I wrong. I do appreciate games that have good character creation, upgrading your character, developing your character, things like that. That's why I love games like Too Many Bones, because that's basically what that game is all about. And this one is no different. So if you are super into character creation, upgrading your character, building your character out to however you want it, this one is right up your alley. Yes, it is not quite as pretty to look at on the board. Now, the artwork has improved, and they've also blown up the artwork. There's more artwork on more cards and things like that. But your player board is not going to be super pretty and covered in artwork. The back is. The back's usually pretty cool because it shows you your race or class or whatever. But the front side is just going to be dry erase. But I tell you what, there is something incredibly satisfying about constantly going in and wiping away your previous score and adding to it, or deciding which one of these am I going to upgrade, or finding, getting those boons where it tells you which one to upgrade or gives you a choice or things like that. So I was very surprised at how, the game itself is somewhat abstract. You're on this very zoomed out map. You're just kind of traveling around in any direction. Really, the whole point of the game is to build up your character as quickly as you can to either then you trigger the fight, in this case with Dracula, or when Dracula finally just says, all right, enough's enough, come fight me. You're really just trying to build up your character to the point where you can take that on and make it a good fight. So I was actually very surprised with the gameplay and how I felt during the game and how satisfying it was to continuously upgrade my character. So I went out and purchased the kind of campaign book. It's like a big D&D book for the first edition of Hexplore Valley of the Dead King, and have been very excited about that too, because it even just takes everything that they did well and adds that storyline campaign element to it. It kind of introduces the game in pieces. I would not recommend this for the beginners, but the campaign, which was Clicks Madness, was very well done. Very impressed by this book. So they will eventually be coming out with Volume 5 very soon. It's in the Aztec kind of era. That's about all I know about it, but there will be a Kickstarter in 2023. So if this is something that interests you, be sure to check it out. All right. Again, I have gone off and talked about a subject without showing you guys the rest of the screenshots I have, but here you can see, an example of the dry erase board that's very just some numbers, and if you don't have good handwriting, it doesn't look very pretty. And the map that you're moving your miniature around on is very zoomed out, so there's not a ton of detail. It's okay. it does somewhat have some table presence on it when you've got it all spread out. It's a little bit of a table hog, but it's not bad. And again, this version, they have stepped it up in the artwork department and things like that. So they've really pushed to make it a better looking game on the table. Anyways. So that's going to do it for 20 through 11. Up next will be my top 10 games of 2022. So if you have been enjoying this series of lists that I've been putting together at the end of the year, please consider giving them a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Once again, thanks for watching. Have a great day.